Well, it's finally happened. The Nintendo Switch 2 has been announced, and boy, did none of us expect this, because there's way more here to cover than I expected there would be. So we're going to rapid fire this a little bit, because this, by no means, was the big grand release that I thought it was going to be. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Right Click. As always, Birdman here, and like you heard in the intro, we're talking about the Nintendo Switch 2 because, man, I got to tell you, it's a big deal. Everybody was really amped and really excited to hear, oh, we finally get real news, not leaked news about the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, if you're not familiar with the Nintendo Switch, brief rundown. Made by the company Nintendo. They made Game Boys, they made the NES, some of the most popular consoles and gaming devices in the world has ever seen, really. They made the Switch several years ago, and it was just a handheld console. It's about yay big, which means nothing over a camera, but the whole point is that it's basically a tablet in the middle, and on each side is the Joy-Con, as they call it. It's just the controllers kind of split in half and half on each side. And it was wildly popular, and it's still wildly popular. Now, here's the thing. When they released did the announcement yesterday on their Nintendo Direct announcement, they always, whenever they do big things, it's like how Steve Jobs used to do the Apple, I forget the name of it, but it was the Apple where they'd stand up and talk about, here's what's coming out. And that's Nintendo's equivalent. It's called the Nintendo Direct. And in this, the big ticket item was obviously Nintendo Switch 2. Now, we're gonna be bouncing a lot here. So again, I'm gonna rapid fire this because this is a shocking scenario to me, truly. Quick information here. The Nintendo Switch 2, it launches on June 5th. April 9th is pre-orders. It's $450, $500 if you get it with the Mario Kart bundle. And now games are $80. Here's the thing. It's not just that games are $80. Physical games, so if you want the physical game, those are also $80, which is wildly bizarre for a couple of reasons. Well, one of which is the fact that, I can't believe I'm saying this, physical games are $90 now. And they are being very open about the fact that you don't actually own the game. So this is a screenshot from Nintendo's website. The game itself isn't included on the game key card, so you'll have to download it before you play. This is just a long, fancy way of saying, hey, that packaging and all of that, the physical game, you don't own it. It's still a license, and we've talked about this before. That's a big deal, and Nintendo is legitimately breaking boundaries by saying, okay, straight up, we're cutting this off. It is all digital. You don't get to have a physical collection anymore, and your physical collection literally means nothing because you throw it in and it's downloaded. It still takes up the system memory, which there's not a lot of, and that's it. That's a really big deal because the games themselves are no longer yours to purchase. They're yours essentially on a licensed lease of sorts. That's a really big deal. Now, let's talk specs here. So I mentioned that it's roughly $500 in the US. Now, here's a quick little breakdown. This is everything. So this is US dollar, euro, Japanese yen, and this is the bundle with Mario Kart. So they do this frequently. When they release a new console, they did this with Wii U and all this. They release it with an option of you can buy this package that comes with this game. Well, long story short, Mario Kart is what they're hanging their hat on, and it's an open world Mario Kart, which is very odd. It's $80, but you get it bundled. Well, this includes that bundled pricing with what is, I believe, to be a generalized taxation onto it. So it's weird. It's very, very weird. You can see Japan only, they did a region-locked version of the Japanese one. That means it's only in Japanese. And the crazy thing is, you see this, you see Japanese multi-language, you see Australian, Canadian, US, EU, UK. That's all fine and well. If you speak a different language than what is listed here, then those languages, you have to purchase those packs. That's a really big deal, because this isn't just normal. Okay, you have the option to go select your language like you do in your phone, like you do on your Xbox, on your PC, on your PlayStation, on your Nintendo Switch 1, all of that. No, if you don't have one that's right, what you're seeing right here, if you don't have this, it doesn't matter. You have to go and pay. You have to go pay for your language. That's insanity to me. Let's talk actual specs, though. We've laid the baselines, the negative baselines off the rip, and there is some negativity in this video, and I apologize. It just is what it is. The big ticket item here is that they have upgraded. They have improved things. So, for example, the original Nintendo Switch was a 6-inch screen. This one is, as you can see, a 7.9-inch screen. Now, the previous Switch had, towards the latter end of its life cycle, they released an OLED screen versus the LCD screen. OLED is just, by every metric, and I'm not going to go into technical details because it's not really necessary, but it's important to note that they went back from an OLED to an LCD, which is a massive, massive, massive downgrade. OLED is the cream of the crop screen in general. TV, monitor, your phone is more than likely, if it was made in the last couple of years, your phone is more than likely an OLED. It's how you get the deepest blacks, because it shuts off the pixels when they're black. That's how you get a deep color schema. Anyways, that's a really big deal that they've dropped it down. It's 1080 rather than 720 in handheld mode, and it supports HDR, and their big thing is that it has a variable refresh rate up to 120 Hz, which means you can play games at 120 FPS. Most people don't know anything outside of the gaming realm, and the people who know this kind of stuff because they work on it, most people don't realize what VRR to 120 Hz means, and it's simple. Your phone, if you have an iPhone 13 and up, and I believe like a Samsung, let's say S20 and up, I want to say, or Note 20. Anyways, point being, if you have something in that ballpark, your phone runs at 120 frames or hertz, whereas it used to run in 60 or 30 previously. Most monitors run in 60. If you go to work and you're provided a monitor, more than likely, it's a 60 hertz monitor. The higher up you go, the smoother it is, because that's how many times the screen is updating. It's a very simple thing. People just don't really realize it, and why would you if it's not something you need to care about? But it's important here because 120 hertz is a big, big step up. We're finally modernizing this console. 120 has been the standard for the last several years, and we haven't had that. It's a bummer that they bumped it down to an LCD screen, but still, what are you going to do? Custom processor is made by NVIDIA. We've been talking about NVIDIA. I'm not really surprised because, as they confirmed, let me find it really quick. They did confirm that the Switch 2 is using DLSS and supports ray tracing. This matters because DLSS and ray tracing is, for all intents and purposes, exclusive to NVIDIA. It makes sense for them to partner with NVIDIA to create this. 256 gigs of storage off the rip. It used to be 32. 32 is comically low. 256, frankly, is comically low for a gaming device where you now have to download everything. You don't have physical games that you can slot in. You have to download everything, and most games are 50, 60, 70, 80 gigs, and they're bringing AAA titles over that are 100. Anyways, this is insane. One thing that's worth noting here is they did say that the micro SD cards that you use for expansion in the Nintendo Switch 1 are not going to be compatible unless if you're using express cards, which most people commonly were. So that's a big hit. You're going to have to rebuy. You don't get to swap your equipment, even though you should be able to by literally every metric. You don't get to swap your storage over like you used to with the 3 previous iterations of the Nintendo Switch, Nintendo Switch 1. Obviously, Wi-Fi 6, this is not a big deal. Can be connected to wired LAN. Outputs to 4K, so if you have a 4K TV, it'll output a resolution of that, and it will do 120 FPS at 1080 and 1440p resolution. Supports HDR10. The rest of this isn't something I really want to focus on, except for this battery life. The battery life is approximately 2 to 6.5 hours. You need to understand this is a big deal because previously the Switch was getting upwards of 9+ hours. This is a significant decrease, and they didn't really bring the battery up to spec, and they're still using lithium-ion batteries, which in this day and age, they could put a bigger battery in with a carbide battery, and it would last an absurd amount of time. For those unaware, carbide batteries are the ones that are replacing lithium-ion batteries in the big tech world right now. A lot of the Asian market is seeing those, which means this, as a Japanese company, really, with all due respect, should have had it. But here we are. It just is what it is. And that's comically low. Potentially a 2-hour battery life while playing a game. That's tough, man. That's really, really tough. I want to give a quick, this is kind of a debrief rundown of kind of an overlook somebody made, and some of it's what we've talked about, some of it's not. But this is a good quick breakdown before we get into some of the nitty gritty. So the Switch 2 screen is 1080p up to 120 Hz. It's an LCD screen, not OLED screen, with HDR support. It has magnetic Joy-Cons, so the controllers slot, they used to slot in and they would break. Now it's magnetic and they pop in. The buttons are bigger. The thumbsticks are bigger. There are mouse controls that you can use. So you can take the Joy-Con off, lay it flat on a mouse pad, and you can use it as a mouse. Very niche, but okay. Improved speakers, built-in microphone, 3D audio. There's a new stand, the new dock, which supports 4K, obviously. It's USB-C on top and bottom this time. It was only bottom on the previous one. And there's actual fan ventilation in the dock, which is a really big deal this time. And it is technically backwards compatible with Switch 1. And that's important because most games now, when a new series is released, like let's say the PlayStation 4, when the PlayStation 5 came out, they offered free upgrades to games that were designed to work with the PlayStation 5's next-gen hardware. And they would offer a free upgrade, so you could play it at the higher resolution or higher frame rate or whatever that the new console could support, but you could still play the games from the last console. Now, not all of them were like that, but they offered it for free. And frankly, that's a really big deal, because here's where we're at. And this is where it goes kind of downhill, and I'm sorry, but this is just the truth. They monetized every piece of this console. Let's start with this. There's a new C button, and it's a capture button, and I'm gonna show you this because my God, it's crazy. It's a new button on the right Joy-Con that basically gives you, it's similar to Discord, honestly. It gives you the pop-up where you can go into party chat and you can play with friends, and yay. Okay, cool. Fine. You can play with friends. That's great. That's not something that necessarily needs to be a big ticket item because it's a friggin' console. You should be able to play with and talk with your friends. But here's where this gets kind of sticky. So, as you just saw there, unless you pay for their monthly subscription, this button becomes inactive. There's no use to this button unless you pay Nintendo their monthly online costs. Now, I'm gonna pull this up. Their costs are, they're getting up there, man. There's individual memberships. They're doing monthly memberships. They are doing a new membership for this. That, and forgive me for not looking here, I gotta find something in particular because it's important. Yeah, so if you want Nintendo Switch Online for a year, it's $30. If you want it for an expansion pack, which I'm about to break down, it's $50 a year, and that's just if we're talking about this one button. you're losing the functionality of this one button, which, might I add, in Nintendo Direct, this right here, this is what they show off. This is what the C button does, and you can see the frame rate is awful. You can share your screen with your friends while you play, and it takes up a massive chunk of the screen. And I don't know why there's French comment. Okay, that was weird. Anyways, you can see they're playing together, and that's great, and they're talking to each other through the microphone on the console. But if you look at the bottom, the frame rate is awful. I mean, genuinely, it's terrible. Well, that's just part of it. Let me show you this. If we want to, let's say, utilize that, if we want to utilize those like face cams at the bottom, right? You have to pay for that. You have to pay for a specific Nintendo camera, and I'm struggling with this one a little bit, and I hope you'll bear with me because I don't quite understand this. I mentioned previously they chose to monetize everything. So basically, if you don't have their online subscription, you can't play with friends, you can't do that pop-up, and that button, the physical button on your controller, is nothing. Here's where we get really wild, and this is on Nintendo's actual website. This is Nintendo, I can see, Nintendo Switch 2 accessories. So they did a separate Pro controller. That's $80. If you need to replace your Joy-Cons, that's $90. If you want a grip so you can take those out, like we just saw this lady playing right here. If you want to replicate this where she's playing like this and you can see in the middle, like in her hands, she's playing like that, that is $35 if you need it to be one that can charge. If you need straps so you don't sling it, $13. $20 for the wheels if you want to make a fake wheel while you play Mario Kart. $50 if you want this camera that allows this to happen. What we're looking at here. This is insanity. And then if you need a replacement dock, it's $110. If you want a screen cover and carrying case, it's $35. $80 for the all-in-one. Just the freaking adapter to charge the Switch is now $30. This is a lot of nickeling and diming. $50 for a camera, and from the looks of it, this has not been confirmed. I want to make this very clear. But they advertised throughout a lot of this. This Nintendo Direct features in this game, in some of these games, that very evidently make it look, if nothing else, it makes it look like you can't do any of this stuff. You can't play some of these mini games without the camera because it it transposes your image over it. Now, I don't know if that's the truth. Maybe, or if that's been confirmed yet. Nothing's come out yet because this console's not out. But if certain mini games like in Super Mario Party are or you have to have that for it, that's crazy. And one of the things that really gets me, and I can't bring myself to understand this, is the dock. The dock that you set the thing in, you set the Switch in to play on your TV. All it has is an Ethernet port, a charging port, and an HDMI port. You don't have USBs on the dock anymore. And if that means if you, I can't believe I'm saying this, but if you want to use some of these accessories, you have one port, and it's at the top of the Switch, which means, one, this cable's going to get busted, and that's not good on your on your port. It just isn't. But I'm looking at my Switch right now. The dock has the same stuff minus the Ethernet port, but it has multiple USB-A docks. Now, this is important, and I'm kind of going off the cuff here. I've got a charging block here, and I'm saying this. Some of you, this will mean absolutely nothing to, and that's why I'm showing you. Some people look at this, go, oh yeah, I know that's no big deal. USB-C, and forgive me, the camera's going to struggle to focus, but it's the round one. Let's see if I can kind of just. This is again super off the cuff. It's the circle. Yeah, it started to. There we go. I'm trying to hold my hand back so it will focus. I know this is a rough way of doing this. That's USB-C. USB-A is your standard square. You've seen this before. It's your standard square. There is nothing here that's unusual, right? Okay. Really janky way of doing it. But I want to make something very clear. These ports that we're talking about, there's one on the bottom, which is used for charging and docking, and then there's one on the top that's a spare. Well, in this case, it's only for the camera. If you need to plug in a controller, you have to go buy their Pro controller that syncs Bluetooth, or you have to buy a controller that's Nintendo branded that will sync to it. If you want to connect other accessories to it, you no longer have these USB-A ports anymore. This is USB-A is not outdated because USB-C is objectively better, but USB-A is on freaking everything. 90% of the people watching this, I guarantee your phone charges with USB-A or USB-C, and most people are still using USB-A. I'm charging my iPad off of this. This is normal. I mean, half of the equipment I use to record plugs in with USB-A. They are actively limiting the use cases of this console, and they're wanting to charge you upwards of $500 for it. Understand that that is deeply, deeply miscalculated. And what blows my mind is they're hanging their hat on the performance side of things, even though one of the developers said outright today, this is not for the high performance gamers. But understand that they're bringing AAA titles like Cyberpunk 2077. That game is a PC beast of a game. They're bringing that over, and they've been advertising, okay, look at all these games that we're bringing. And this is a little meme for you, but it's true. They're bringing them over for $90 a pop. Or like Breath of the Wild, let's say, is normally $60 on the Switch. It's now going to be $70 or $80. So you're going to have to pay more if you want to play it on this game. If you already have it, then you have to pay for an expansion pack, which is what I was talking about with the memberships. Because if you want the expansions built into your membership, which you still have to download separately, you have to pay for a higher priced membership. That's insanity. And what we have here is we have them parading these AAA titles. And this is a meme, but it's also really true. Red Dead Redemption 2 cost $400 million from the ground up, and it originally sold for $60. Nintendo develops Mario Kart legitimately using reused assets for less than $50 million, and they want to sell it to you for $80 digitally or $90 physically, which is still digitally. That is crazy. And this is where we get into, hey, these AAA titles. Perfect example, right? This whole thing is predicated around, we're bringing Elden Ring, we're bringing Cyberpunk, we're bringing Final Fantasy VII the refresh, the retrograde, or whatever they call it. Remake, integrate, that's it. They're bringing all this stuff over and saying, well, look, it's running at 120 FPS on this new system. Well, no. Testing has come out. Look in the top right, 30 FPS for Elden Ring. 30 FPS. Cyberpunk is running at 23. They announced today that it caps at 40 FPS. We're still talking lower than what the Switch 1 was performing at. Final Fantasy, 30 FPS. Well, this matters not because games are running at a lower FPS. It matters because they're using all of this variable refresh rate to 120 hertz, and it can do 4K, and it can do 1080, and it can do 1080, 1440, and all this crap, right? They're marketing all of this as a high-performance thing, and then they have one developer going, it's not high performance, but they're hanging their hat on a way to charge you $500, which is a ludicrous price for a console in the first place. But it doesn't perform at the spec that they're trying to deceive you about. And let's be honest, they legitimately are trying to deceive by saying, hey, we're bringing AAA titles over. It's like, okay, great. But why are they Why are they playing like it's a 2014 game? And then you look at the stuff that comes out of Nintendo's actual development side, like Legend of Zelda, Pokemon. These games are not developed to run at 120. They've never been. They were barely developed for 60 FPS. And this is important because Nintendo doesn't make things that are designed to be played at a high performance level. I don't have a problem with that. Arguably, Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, its follow-up game, were the only ones that I could look at and go, that would look fantastic at 100 hertz, 120 hertz, whatever it may be, right? Why make this case when this is not your bread and butter and you're using it as a way to charge $500+? This is important because if I go buy a PlayStation 5, I can get a PlayStation 5 bundle for the $500 to $600 price range now. Well, if I want to play it mobile, I can get for $200 or less, I can get a PlayStation Portal that I can play literally anywhere in the world from my PlayStation 5 at home. That is insane. And you're talking about $700. Well, they're already charging $500 for the bundled price anyways. Now, $200 is a sizable step up, but that's not really the point now, is it? And that's the problem. They're bringing unrealistic expectations based off of what came out in their Nintendo Direct and all of these officially released things and saying, hey, it can run it. It's like, yeah, it can run it, but can it run it well? Well, the answer is no. And then what are they showing here? Again, from the Nintendo Direct release yesterday. If you have the Nintendo Switch version of a game, you can play the Nintendo Switch 2 edition by purchasing an upgrade pack. Well, I just made the correlation to PlayStation. Well, PlayStation, as I mentioned at the start of this, when they did their change from 4 to 5, they offered free upgrades for the majority of their big stuff. Some of it had to be paid, of course. But they are saying, Nintendo's saying outright, if you want to play an old game and you want to play it on this, you got to upgrade it. And you have to pay for it. And what we're seeing as pre-release information is that it's going to be $10 to $15 a pop at minimum. That's insane. Well, this is just consistent deception. And here's the worst part. And I'm just going to show you this real quick. They did Ask the Developer Volume 16. It came out yesterday. It's about the Nintendo Switch 2. And this is a lot of stuff. I want to point out this. What does it mean that the Switch and Switch 2 aren't compatible at a hardware level? Keep this in mind. Their shtick on their, showed it from their website, is that the Switch 2 is backwards compatible. Well, they're saying that they aren't hardware compatible. The developer says, exactly, this time we decided to take on the challenge of using a new technology to run Switch games. The interviewer said, if we tried to use another developer said, if we tried to use technology like software emulators, we'd have to run the Switch 2 at a full capacity, but that would mean the battery wouldn't last so long, which it already doesn't last long. So we did something somewhere in between a software emulator and hardware compatibility. This is so insanely important because we covered previously things like Power World and other emulators of Nintendo games that are 20 years old. Nintendo was literally sending people to people's doors to give them cease and desists and threaten them for using emulators. Emulators have been around for years. I've run emulators on my phone since high school. And Nintendo are the only people who have a problem with it, took it to international court, and by the way, just lost it because it's not a fair argument. And now, in this Switch 2, they are making the case that they have made something in between hardware compatible and a software emulator. You understand? That's a huge deal. And they're trying to make the case that, oh, this is a great bundle. Well, you break it down, and on every single facet, it's not a great bundle. They didn't even update the operating system to look any different than the first gen's operating system. It's just whiter now. It's literally more white in color. That's it. You click on things, they're outlined. Everything they've showed us, there's nothing here to justify the price of something that is similar in price to a top-end gaming console that you'll get 4 times the performance out of in many cases, and it will provide you games that you can actually utilize the hardware and your peripherals. The Switch 2 doesn't do that, but they're claiming that it does. But when it's broken down and you get into the fine print, it shows that it doesn't. And here's where we're at. They do a live stream about their developers sitting down, exposing Mario Kart World and showing you about it, all of the comments are just, you guys need to drop the price. You guys need to drop the price because this is insane. This is not a fair price. It's not a fair experience. It is deceptive to the customer, and Nintendo fans will want it and love it, and there's nothing wrong with that, but people need to understand that what they're getting into may be deceptive and they don't even realize it. That needs to be put out there. This kind of education of sorts needs to be pushed around, because you are in the, if you want the EU equivalent or the UK equivalent in pricing to the dollar, $620 for this, that's insanity. Absolute insanity. And if you speak a different language, you have to pay to put your language on it. Insanity. And people need to know that, because this is an internationally sold product. It just is. That's the end of my rant for now. Go look into it as well, because there's so much more. I can't cover everything. There's so much more. I'm mind blown by this. I did not see this taking the turn of events that it did, and yet it did. It's insane. But I hope you all enjoyed. I think this is a pretty informative breakdown. It was a bit rapid fire because there's a lot to cover, and I appreciate you hanging along with me. But as always, my name is Birdman. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Right Click. Go follow us on rightsidemedia.org. Reach out, check out the articles, check out all of the content we're putting out. We're everywhere, man. Go check it out. I appreciate you watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys in the next one.